Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for Atlanta Business Radio. Brought to you by OnPay. Built in Atlanta, OnPay is the top-rated payroll and HR software anywhere. Get 1 month free at onpay.com. Now, here's your host.
Lee Cantor here, another episode of Atlanta Business Radio, and this is going to be a good one. But before we get started, it's important to recognize our sponsor, OnPay. Without them, we could not be sharing these stories. Today on Atlanta Business Radio, we have Katharine Mobley, and she's with First Advantage. Welcome, Katharine.
Hi, great. Thanks for having me.
Well, before we get too far into things, tell us about First Advantage. How are you serving folks?
I will. First Advantage is one of those little kind of sleeper brands in Atlanta. We happen to be the world's largest background screening company. So actually what we do is we do pre-hire, post-hire, and rescreening, as well as continuous monitoring of employees. We work with a lot of the Atlanta brands, but happen to work with 55% of the Fortune 100 and 45% of the 500. So we're a global organization with 26 offices around the globe, although no one's in them.
Now, because of the pandemic, has that impacted your business at all now? There are so many remote workers and so many people that aren't maybe meeting face-to-face like they used to with the people that are hiring them?
Well, let's be honest. I mean, hiring through this pandemic has changed everything. The pandemic itself is just a change catalyst. It's like unlike anything any workforce or any individual has ever experienced. Every company, school, organization, and person has been, forced to learn and change their strategic plans moving forward. So you kind of have to plan for the worst, but hope for the best. For us, we took a strategic approach from, we are a global organization. So we took some of our first calls on COVID in January when it hit China and really started working with our clients to identify technical solutions to address concerns as they arose, because you're moving workforces, which means, are they compliant? Are they, behind firewalls? Are they doing different things? How do you, adapt to this new environment? So we worked with our clients and we were able to create a new multifaceted suite of solutions designed specifically for COVID. They were known as the new future of work. And it basically was for us to help our companies or our clients get back to work quickly, to screen new hires, because believe it or not, a lot of people did hire during COVID, mainly essential workers and frontline workers, as well as temporary workers that were needed for, short-time contract labor. So we saw a lot of rescreening happening of existing and furloughed employees that were returning to work. And speed was really the key, but we also had to endure and make sure that they were compliant during this process. I think one of the things that you'll see too is we looked forward very early on that, this is a new work environment. It's not going to go away. It's not going to change for quite some time. A lot of people are not going back into their office environments in mass quantities for quite some time. And so we had to make sure that we had self-assessment tools that were employer-provided questions to help our clients determine the work readiness level of their employees and candidates, both on-site and off. With a remote workforce, you need to make sure that they're workforce ready when they're working at home. Do they have optimal internet speeds? Do they have a designated office space? Do they have a wireless secure network? The other one is people were starting to bring employees back. Is your employee ready to come back to work? And do they feel safe to do it? So as we continue down this path, I think we'll see more and more people rejoining the workforce and choosing to return to the work and returning into office environments. But I also think you'll see a lot of more technological advances and solutions designed to deliver and empower the employer to provide a safe and effective workspace for all employees, whether they're in an office or remote.
So now it sounds like the scope of your work changed slightly in the sense that a lot of what you were saying didn't sound like those are background checks or that kind of work. It was more helping them work from home or facilitate an effective, safe, compliant way to work from home. That sounds like the breadth of your work is kind of getting larger.
It is. We had to create a virtual drug test because drug testing still had to be done in certain compliant industries. So we had to create a stream of a oral tox product that was done over video conferencing that still held to the chain of command that required it to be compliant. We had to create tiered solutions that would fast track background screening solutions for businesses and nonprofits as they were trying to get back. And then we also helped companies optimize the employee retention tax credit to process and identify tax incentives from the CARES Act. So don't confuse it with, we just went to assessments. All the screening was still there. We were still doing it. These were just other things we had to layer and add to the depth and breadth of our service offering.
And that was because your clients didn't have the skill set to do that kind of work. Like you were already kind of in that neighborhood, so you just kind of, it evolved naturally, it sounds like.
It really came from our clients. Once we really started seeing COVID spread across the globe, we created a task force that called all of our clients and asked them, what are you seeing? What trends are you seeing? What can we help you with? And that's where a lot of this came from. They needed to know, how do I assess someone's ready to come back to work? Or how do I assess they know how to work? How do I hire someone that I'm never going to meet in person potentially? What does the screening process look like? How do we built dynamic maps that plugged into court closures and university systems so clients knew if they were trying to run screens in those areas around the globe, what was open and what wasn't. So their turnaround times might be a little bit slower than normal, not due to anything under our control, but due to the fact that court closures and university systems were shut down. So it was definitely a fluid environment.
So now, what about First Advantage? How did you handle as an organization that transition? Were you already, a lot of you working remotely, or was this new to you as well?
We had a good amount of our workforce working remotely, but let's be honest, no one was prepared to take their entire workforce to an online environment as quickly as we did. We migrated 26 offices around the globe in about 36 hours. We were lucky to have a lot of technical counterparts that helped us with a lot of things that we needed to do. We were able to have our business continuity plans go into action and make sure that business stayed as usual, that we didn't lose capacity to ensure that our clients, were getting the services and the products that they needed. So it was very long days, very long hours for everyone from obviously my teams in marketing. So we had to handle all the internal and external comms. Operations had to handle the stability of getting everyone out of offices and into remote work environments. HR obviously handling all of those components. And it was really an all hands on deck. We have a really great leadership team that's been together for now over 3 to 4 years. And I think having that tight group at the top, we were able to act really fast, implement plans that we already had in place and change them as needed, and also ensure to our clients that we were doing the work that they needed to have done, because there were people that were having to hire very quickly during this process because they had to be on the front lines or stock the shelves. So we had to ensure that there was no gap in their work.
So now, are you starting to see some trends? It seems like a difficult thing to be predicting the future in terms of how this is going to play out. Everybody's now everybody pretty much is looking into next year, but even then, I mean, it seems that's even the crystal ball for that seems kind of just lucky guesses at this point.
I agree with you. I think that we're seeing a lot of people try to develop a strategy for returning to work. But, I mean, you have to take into account the fluidity of this situation. Different industries require different protocols, and even those have varying outcomes. And you've got to have policies, procedures, all sorts of things for social distancing and mask requirements until we have mass immunity or vaccines. If you take a look at the impact of schools reopening, those protocols vary greatly. As you know, I'm sure here in Georgia, one school district offered in-person or digital learning. It only had 27% of students opt in and stay at home. And so school began on August 3rd. And within 5 days, more than 900 students and 42 staff were told to quarantine. And we're still seeing that district close schools on a daily basis. I think that in regards to corporations, those that have a high level of agility, similar to we did at First Advantage, where we were able to go straight into action, didn't take us a lot of time to hem and haw over what we needed to do. We just went into action and did it along with our clients. I think those types of companies will prevail. They got to be able to morph into these changing times, have a high level of agility to respond to the needs of their employees and their clients. And when your employees are happy and they feel that they're safe, I think workers will naturally gravitate to those types of organizations. You are starting to hear a lot more about new tools from the self-assessment tools I talked about. We're always going to have screening, pre-hire, post-hire, and re-screening and continuous monitoring. But I think, we're not stepping into some of these, but some of the things we are seeing clients ask is about contact tracing, what's happening in one region versus another, geo-tracking, obviously ready-to-work assessments. And employees just want to feel comfortable that if they have to come into an office or a warehouse environment, is it a safe environment to be in? We're also seeing a lot of employees with high turnover, because if they do opt into a hospitality, restaurant, or retail situation and they feel that that environment isn't comfortable for them, they're electing to apply somewhere else at faster rates. And so you're seeing higher turnover in some of those positions because they may be going home and taking care of a high-risk individual. And so it's just a very, very fluid market. If you operate from a physical location, I think workplace safety has to be the forefront and the center of your strategy. And even if you're working with remote workers, you still have to make sure is your workforce, what are they doing on their off hours and how is that impacting your business and what's happening behind the scenes. So I think you're seeing a complete shift in the way that HR functions, hiring functions, screening functions, and really what is it to be an employee from the previous days of, brick and mortar to now, most people are in a at-home environment unless they can't be otherwise.
So now at First Advantage, do you mentioned hospitality. Are there any industries that you play a bigger role in, or is it pretty much industry agnostic?
We play a very large role in retail, staffing, business services. A lot of our clients, like I said, are around the globe, so it can be agnostic across regions depending on the complexities of searches. What you can search for in the United States, obviously you can't do the same type of search in China, so those types of clients can vary. We also have financial services and healthcare. So it really runs the gamut. We have a deep expertise. We have a Six Sigma team that can come in and do an analysis on what are you screening for, what should you be screening for, and how can we assist you in that process. So we tend to be more of a value-added partner than just a solution provider. We don't believe in that type of business model. We really want to help you build the best screening solution that ultimately, at the end of the day, helps you hire and retain the best talent, but also helps you enable the fact that you're compliant and protect your corporate reputation.
Now, you mentioned you work with a lot of the largest enterprise level firms. Is there also a small business solution?
We do. We have a small business and a mid-market solution. We have different partnerships within the small business sector that help drive traffic under different protocols. Before just a volume metric. Obviously, we saw a shift. Most of those hiring during the pandemic were the enterprise clients, but we are seeing an uptick in mid-market and small business coming back as people are trying to get back to work and people are trying to rehire furloughed employees or bring new hires on board.
So now part of what you provide, or you create these trends and insights reports. You can't go by last year. This is a whole kind of blank canvas here you're playing with. But are you still doing that or planning to do that into this year, next year?
We are. We take our own existing data and run those reports, but we also add a layer of our customer feedback so that it is our existing data of, 71 million screens from 2019, but it's also over 1,000 of our customers telling us the trends that they're seeing. So even in this year's report, when it was published, we caveated that obviously this is not something that anyone could have predicted. This is what we saw in last year. There are some, anecdotes within this report from our clients of what we're seeing currently. But it is something that gives people more of an idea from a size of company, a vertical focus, and then a geographic focus so that they can understand what is happening in regions. And also, just from 2018 to now, most people went from 3 screens to over 5. So we're seeing employees getting screened and screened more. That screen can obviously be going in past 2020, self-assessments, ready to hire. Are they, health checks, et cetera? We don't know what that market's going to be, but we did caveat that in our report and gave some of our customer insights.
Now, is it something that, from a candidate standpoint, is there anything that's like a First Advantage certification that you've been vetted and that, you've already been through all these screenings? Is that anything like that exist?
You are looking to the future. And yes, we are working on different types of protocols that would allow a easier experience for the candidate. It is a process. Obviously, compliance plays a heavy role into this. There have been discussions, obviously, it's long-term, and not just within First Advantage, but within the industry, that where can new technologies like blockchain and IA play into these roles. However, a lot of that type of innovation was put on hold for a little bit because of COVID, and I don't know how much it will either create a new disruption within the industry or help us evolve further and more quickly because it's such a different world. But yeah, ultimately, I do think that long term you will see where a candidate would ultimately be qualified because they've been screened previously. ATS systems, a lot of the times, have that type of mechanism, not necessarily from a screening perspective, but from a candidate profile perspective. So the industry could definitely go in that direction.
So now, right now, is your typical employer more vulnerable to this, like somebody with kind of a shady background sneaking through this process because they don't have tight enough systems if they're not, clients of yours? Should they be very concerned?
I think you have to ask, what is your risk threshold? So certain industries require a higher level of risk. So healthcare, for instance, obviously you need to ensure that people have the right credentialing. Financial services, you need to ensure that you have people that are working in the right, with the right backgrounds, et cetera. There are other ones, though, that we've even seen within retail and other industries where people wanted to do a deeper screen on cashiers because they felt that everyone's a newscaster, so they could very easily say something that's broadcast on the news, and then someone investigates that individual. So you want to make sure you're hiring the best talent. But it's just a different world at this point.
Now, is there any kind of low-hanging fruit or best practices you could advise employers out there?
I think right now it's really hard. The market is so volatile. This is changing. At the onset of it, was changing second by second, minute by minute, and hour by hour. I think that you got to look at the traditional model for background screening pre-COVID even was pre-employment checks. They do exactly what they say. They search up potential employees' past for applicant discrepancies that may preclude them from a position. So they pass their pre-screen, you hire them. But we saw a trend before COVID moving into what happens after you hire an employee, especially in today's world. So the truth is that people and their risk occur at random, and we have data that proves that our customers have as much as 1% of their employee population that may have been convicted of a crime while employed. While that 1% sounds low, on an enterprise level, that can be 10,000 people in your organization. So the fluidity of the market and the less face-to-face interactions that employees are having with their employer or their organization, I think you're going to see a steady uptick in the use of criminal monitoring. So rather than the one and done approach, I think you're going to see more levels of screening. Like I said, data proves that from 2018 to now, screens went from 3 to 5. I think you'll see more consistent screening of a candidate. I hate to say it, but I think you'll see more geo-tracking. People want to know that their employees are being productive. And while that sounds big brotherish and we don't do it, I think employers will want to know that type of information. So I do think you'll see a shift. It's going to determine with this pandemic how long that lasts and when do we ever really return to the workforce as we once did.
So now, what is the pain a company is having where First Advantage is the solution? And I'm sure it's different for enterprise as opposed to small business. But if you could go through, like, what are the kind of the breadcrumbs that companies are leading to you so that you know that they might be a good fit for you as a client?
Sometimes it can be news headlines. For instance, with more and more people in the previous, again, post-pandemic, of people entering homes or riding in cars, et cetera, a really bad news headline can be, problematic for your corporate brand, your revenue, et cetera. But also it brings light to who are you hiring and how closely are you staying connected with the role that they play and the risk that it's providing to the company. So I think that's one thing that you will see. For us, we tend to... background screening used to be a commodity. It used to be a checkbox. And I think we're really taking on a value-added approach of being a solution provider to our clients by ensuring that we're building them the right screens based upon their risk profile, their need for speed, et cetera. You can also have small businesses that want to protect their brand reputation at the same level of an enterprise. So they may see it as a more valuable asset. It really depends on the organization, the size, how quickly they have to hire, and how many people they hire in a year.
Now, if somebody wants to have more substantive conversation with you or somebody on your team, especially of navigating through COVID, what is the website? What's the best way to get a hold of you guys?
It's FADD.com. And if you go to it, you'll see at the very beginning all of our information regarding COVID, different solutions we've helped people to navigate this pandemic, and that will continuously be updated. And obviously, you can always reach out to us directly from the website.
And that's FADV.com.
F
as in Frank, right?
Yep. S as in Frank. Yep.
All right. Well, Katharine, thank you so much for sharing your story today.
Thank you.
All right, this is Lee Cantor. We will see you all next time on Atlanta Business Radio. And remember, this work would not be possible without the support of our sponsor, OnPay. Please support them so we can continue to share these important stories.
Today's episode of Atlanta Business Radio is brought to you by OnPay. Built in Atlanta, OnPay is the top-rated payroll and HR software anywhere. Get 1 month free at onpay.com.